When I went to Chicago this year to see the Exponent Hi-Fi show, I was overwhelmed. There were so many loudspeakers, so many amplifiers, so many rooms to check out, and my eyes were going just like shh, 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 shh. However, one particular loudspeaker company did catch my attention. And this loudspeaker company strives to bring the high-end world to its knees by offering a low and a reasonable price tag for the same exact quality you would get in an ultra high-end loudspeaker. I definitely had to put their claims to the test with my own ears. So a few weeks later, I had the Victoria loudspeakers in here for my listening. And all I have to say is that I think I found a true gem in Hi-Fi. I love going to Hi-Fi shows, and particularly because you get to scavenge and find something you really like or something extraordinary that may not be getting the attention they deserve in press or elsewhere. I mean, take the Craftsmen loudspeakers for example. This new loudspeaker company is actually located very close to where I live in Canada. But if I didn't go to Exponent, I don't think I can say in confidence that I would have found the brand and decided to listen to it in my own listening space. Upon first glance at the speakers, I found it attractive for two main reasons: the beautiful cabinetry style and quality drivers. The pair I have here is called the Victoria, and it features the Enhanced Mass System, or EMS for short, which in short means that the speaker's cabinet is made of double layers of MDF totaling 1.5 inch of thickness. To put it into context, most loudspeakers in the hi-fi consumer world use less than 1 inch of thickness for their cabinet, and once we start to approach the high-end world or the ultra high-end category, then we start to see a little bit above 1 inches or just slightly under 1 inch of thickness for the cabinets or use of different materials. So safe to say 1.5 inch of thickness for their MDF cabinet is pretty impressive and something that is pretty rare in the hi-fi space. And the main reason why it's rare is because it's harder to manufacture a thick, cabinet like this, and it's also more expensive, amongst other reasons that we won't get into in this video. Now, the double layers of MDF on this cabinet plays a double role, pun intended. First, and the obvious one, is that it makes the speakers more heavy, therefore mass loading the loudspeakers. And you may actually have seen this before where people put like stuff on top of their speakers that's really heavy, and that's actually something that works. It's like kind of compressing down on something, or if you see heavy speakers like Wilson Audio loudspeakers. So mass loading is a real thing, and it does bring benefits when done right. But I'm not going to get into that subject too much in this video. Now, the second is obviously the cabinet rigidity as well as the resonance. As you can imagine, double layers provide great resonance control as well as tube bracing inside the cabinet as well, and overall provides a very rigid structure to the speaker cabinet. And Audio Craftsmanship prides itself of, their craftsmanship of their loudspeakers, that they strive to bring heirloom quality loudspeakers that will stand the test of time. Overall, the speakers look elegant and stylish with its real wood veneer finish, and I absolutely dig it. I also started out by using this stand right here that is sold separately on Audio Craftsmanship's website. And it's a really nicely made stand. It's a really well crafted stand. It looks beautiful, as you can see. However, it was a little bit taller for my liking, as I'm sitting low on a lounge chair. So if you're sitting on a couch or a high, theater seat or something like that, then this will work. However, it was just too high. So instead, I decided to use my solid steel stance that's about 24 inches in height. Now, this speaker also doesn't come with a traditional grill. Instead, it comes with this little mechanism that you put on top of the speakers, and it protects the tweeters. According to Audio Craftsman, it doesn't affect the sound. However, when I played with and without it, I overall preferred it without the grill, so to speak. So I only used it when I had to use it to protect the tweeter. Otherwise, during my listening sessions, I did not put the grill on. Now, this really nice finish on this loudspeaker may lead you to believe that this is gonna cost you a pretty penny. And you're right. This loudspeaker was set to be $6,000 going through the typical dealer and distributor chain. when it was released at the Exponent Hi-Fi show. But ever since then, they have changed their business model by cutting out the middleman, since they noticed that they're not going to be able to mass produce this, since every single one has to be painstakingly handmade. So instead, they cut out the middleman and decided to go directly to the consumers, so adapting the direct-to-consumer model, so bringing the price of the Victoria loudspeakers down from $6,000 to $4,500 for the pair. And I admit, $4,500 is still not a small chunk of change for anyone. However, when you look at the quality components that go into this loudspeaker, the value is there to justify the cost. The drivers used in this loudspeaker is Sia's loudspeaker drivers, and their drivers from Sia's is very well respected and is a very high-end driver that is used in some of the nicest high-end loudspeakers that is not very inexpensive. The tweeter is a 1.1 inch 29mm soft dome tweeter. This tweeter is a really nice tweeter and something you will rarely see at this price range. And the reason I say that is because each one of these tweeters is approximately $400 and you need 2 of them. So that's $800 already for just the tweeters on this loudspeaker. To put it into context and put it into contrast even, the tweeters used in ultra high-end speakers are usually 1/3 of the price of this tweeter. The 6.5 inch woofers are also Sia's drivers from the XL series that also have many of the technology and know-hows generated from years of driver designing and manufacturing by Sia's. The nice drivers in these loudspeakers probably contribute around 30% of the total cost of these loudspeakers. But I know, it is about the implementation of the drivers rather than cost. As anyone that knows about speaker designing will tell you, even if you put the most expensive and most glorified drivers in a cabinet, if you don't have the crossover right or the implementation right, then you will have terrible sound. And I'm happy to note that the crossover on the Victoria was designed with careful expertise and using top-notch parts from French and European brands. As well, the low-pass and high-pass filters are mounted separately in the chamber, that together with the drivers allow for a reasonable 88 dB sensitivity with a frequency response of 42 Hz to 25 kHz plus minus 3 dB. The Victoria loudspeakers are a ported design, and it does have a pretty impressive mid-bass presence. So I liked this speaker with 3 feet away from the wall behind the speakers, and I told them towards my ears very ever so slightly. And that's how I liked them. Now, I did experiment and push them back closer to the wall boundaries, and it did still work, but I did miss the depth and the width in the soundstage. Now, depending on the room, you will be able to get away with putting them closer to the wall boundaries, but this speaker is a speaker that really shines when you pull them a little bit out of the room to give it breathing room. The bass is extremely textured and nuanced. It isn't the most tactile, impactful bass, but it extends really low into my room. It loads the room really nicely, giving me really well textured bass, nuanced, and this full kind of warmth in the bass region. In fact, I had to check if my subs were on. And yes, it really extends and fills the room nicely to where it almost feels like I have a REL subwoofer on. And it reminds me a lot of the tonal characteristic and the quality of the sub of the REL subwoofers. I tested the Victoria with various different amplifiers I had in here, or have in here currently, and they don't seem to be too picky with amplifier pairings and work with a variety of different amplifiers. For example, amplifiers like AGD, Billy Amp Mark II, Blue Knuckle Tube Integrated Amplifier, and even something much less expensive like the Sauvage all sounded good and satisfying to me in the bass. But my absolute favorite has to be the AGD with the Victoria loudspeakers, as it provided really nice texture, warmth, and body to the sound and the meatiness to it, and overall the really nice refinement across all the spectrum of the frequencies. Sometimes when I hear lean or thin sounding loudspeakers, I'm okay with mostly female vocals. I just find it okay. However, with male vocals, I always feel like there's something missing. That warmth, that meatiness to the sound. But with the Victoria, you get a really nice meatiness and warmth to the mid-range that is really satisfying. There's a beauty to it in the mid-range that almost reminds me of like a British loudspeaker like Harbeth, but maybe with a slight more clarity. Both female, male vocals and instruments, especially with music like jazz or acoustical music, just gives me so much goosebump and just overall amazing musicality on this loudspeaker. And that's kind of interesting because when it comes to warm or laid back loudspeakers, I always found that while it sounded good with jazz or vocals, for example, with acoustical instruments and guitar specifically, I found that it lacked the articulation when the strings are hit or strummed or plucked, for example. In this case, you kind of get both. You do get that clarity and articulation, even though this is a pretty laid back, relaxed sounding loudspeaker. The mid-range has this beauty and warmth and body to it, while still having some clarity and articulation so you can hear those plucks and instruments. Overall tonality really allows for that to happen. Granted, it's not the most articulate or edged out kind of speaker. It's not the most detailed. It's not forward sounding in the mid-range. So if that's the type of sound you like, then this is not the type of speaker for you. Now, source matching or the DAC you use with this loudspeaker does matter. I was using the Audio Notes DAC, which I found to be a smooth sounding DAC. So along with the Denapis Athena preamplifier that I found to be a little bit more on the detailed oriented sound, a little bit brighter from neutral. And I found that with that pairing with the AGD with the Victoria loudspeakers, I would get a nice balance, but I was wrong. The top end wasn't extended enough, it wasn't airy enough. Don't get me wrong, it sounded still very, very good, but I thought I would do a little bit more experimentation, so I tried different DACs, and I ultimately liked the Denafrips Terminator DAC with the Athena preamplifier and with the AGD monoblocks. However, I also found another solution that I thought, quite frankly, for much less money made a lot of sense, and that was the EvoSolo DMP A6 Master Edition. So this is a streamer, preamplifier, DAC, kind of like an all-in-one, and straight to the AGD using balanced connection really brought me a really nice sound for a minimal setup that cost a fraction of the price of what I was using before in the system. And I found this synergy to work really, really well and brought me great textures, space nuances, the mid-range that I was talking about, but also the high frequency. Now the high frequency now, as I would describe it, had more air, had more presence, had a little bit more extension. Still on the relaxed side, but now there was air and spaciousness to the rest of the sound that really allowed for the sound stage and imaging and depth to open up. And that was just an amazing realization when you get that synergy right. Much like the Rosso Fiorentino Sotaldo loudspeakers I just recently reviewed, it's really nice to listen to for long periods of time, and even though it's a laid back sound, you do get all the details readily there, it's just not in your face. And I would say the high frequency is extremely refined yet smooth. And I didn't find it offensive or aggressive or in your face at any point in time, or bright or fatiguing sound for that matter. And that goes for several tracks I've played. I played well recorded all the way to poor recorded tracks, and it all sounded good. Heck, I even played modern tracks to see, how far I can go with a speaker before it brings me brightness to my ears. And even modern tracks sounded good on this loudspeaker. It sounds smooth but refined, well controlled on the top end. And really, this pairing with this loudspeaker brought me just an absolute glory in the high frequency. It reminds me a lot of the Sotaldo loudspeakers once again in the high frequency, but I would say the Victoria is ever so slightly more extended and a little bit more air. So overall, I find this loudspeaker to be a perfect fit for someone who likes a laid-back, warm-sounding sound signature like I do, that still wants some air and refinement and details in their music. And people that like Sotaldo loudspeakers, for example, I keep bringing it up because it's so similar, is going to really love this loudspeaker. It definitely has more meat to the sound and a little bit more bass extension and more bass amount in the mid bass. But definitely it's a very impressive loudspeaker sound that rivals very high-end and ultra high-end loudspeakers in the laid-back category. I also think if you enjoy Sonos Faber loudspeakers, I think you will enjoy this loudspeaker very much. In fact, if this speaker came out as a Sonos Faber homage series, I wouldn't be surprised. It does have that marriage between vintage Sonos Faber sound and the modern Sonos Faber sound. It has extension and airiness more than the vintage Sonos Faber sound. So definitely my type of sound and definitely enjoyable. So that's pretty much it for me. I hope this video was helpful, enjoyable, and if it was, please click that like button as it helps my channel out greatly. And I hope to see you guys on my next journey, and I'll see you guys on the next one.